Welcome back to another episode of Steve's Two Cents. This episode is episode 4, and it's about avoiding limiting for as long as possible on your brand new betting accounts.
Shouts out Big Steve.
So limiting in general, I don't think it can be avoided in the long term. If you're a successful full-time gambler, you are going to get limited at some point. You do your job right and you keep on winning. But the point of this episode is when you make a new account, how can you get as much out of your account as possible before they eventually do limit you? Obviously, if you're doing this full-time, one of the biggest challenges is getting limited. You know, the more money you make and getting limited and having to start a new account, it's quite a bit of a pain in the backside. And that's, to me personally, I find that's one of the biggest challenges. I always used to think you'd run out of books. You will never run out of books. I live in Australia. The MMA market's not the biggest, but it's constantly expanding. And if you live somewhere else, I'm sure there's a lot of options, but it's always good to, if you have a good book or your favorite book, getting limited on it's quite the pain. So here's some of the steps that I would go through. Personally, one of the most important steps I would say is when you first open up a new account, the first thing is to prime it or break it in. What that means is, when you first open up an account, don't just start putting $1,000 on an MMA market, and especially on a market that's not a big market. So not a money line or not a prop or parlay, for example. For example, Bet365 has significant strikes or takedown markets. Don't just start putting big money on those kind of markets as soon as you've opened up an account. That's a red flag. That means this guy knows what he's doing and he's opened up an account just to target those specific props, and he's putting big money. Get rid of him straight away. So what happens is, in the first month of you opening an account, there is a period where the bookies just monitor your activity, right? So in that priming stage, you should be losing. You should be betting small, betting like an amateur essentially. So parlays, bet different sports, soccer, footy, hockey, whatever. Just bet uncharacteristically. You don't have to bet every day. After a month, it's going to prolong the account in the long run. So you might think it's a bit of a waste of time or a waste of money, but in the long term, if you're a serious full-time gambler, these accounts are worth a lot, right? They're worth a lot more than a few $100s. And priming these accounts for a month, I reckon it's one of the most important things. I would say it's the number one important thing to avoiding getting limited. So for the first month of opening your account, just bet small, bet on all kinds of different sports, look like a casual bettor, and that should prolong your account. After 1 month, then you can slowly start going crazy. Part 2, I would say, it's mix it up, right? So I just mentioned betting on specific markets that a lot of bookies don't have and that don't take massive money. So let's say takedown props, etc. Avoid those. Don't just bet those. Mix it up, bet parlays, bet money lines, bet props, and bet those here and there. If I had a bookie where I just bet those specifically, obviously I made an account just for that specific market. No other books had that. And that's one of the quickest times I've ever been limited. Putting $1,000 on, one takedown by a fighter, and, worked once, worked twice. And then my third bet straight away, they started reviewing it because, first of all, I didn't do step 1. I didn't prime the account for 1 month, and I started putting big money on a low liquidity market, which means a market that can't take a lot of action. So mix it up. Even when the priming period is over, don't just go crazy. Don't go, all right, I can go just back to smashing this one specific prop market. And what makes it easier is if you have multiple books, you can play a little bit there, play some money lines there, and then put your other of the same bet on a different account, right? So, or a different book, pardon me. So you're not just smashing it all on one and then amplifying the chance that it gets limited nice and quick. The third step is avoid constantly placing bets that have good CLV, which is closing line value. If you think, for example, you bet on this fighter and this fighter is going to move by 30 cents because the public is going to bet him, which is unavoidable, right? If you're a good bettor, you're constantly going to get good CLV, right? Because you look into those fights. If you're betting in advance before other people bet it, you will also, that's what good bettors do. They get ahead, right? So that's unavoidable. The mistake that I made was I used like a bookie system where I was looking at all the books around the world and I could see where the line was trending. And I had stale books over here in Australia that I would bet on before they could drop. So the graphs was telling me that the lines were going to drop on this specific fighter, and I would bet them on my stale book before it dropped, and I always beat the CLV movement, and I always had CLV, closing line movement. I always bet it because I knew it was going to happen. And if you just keep doing it, if you're just doing it like a machine, then the bookie is going to pick up that, all right, this guy's using some sort of software, he's cheating. 9 out of 10 times or 10 out of 10 times, he keeps getting closing line movement. You essentially can't be like a robot, right? Sure, you keep getting CLV. First of all, it doesn't mean your bets are going to win all the time, right? A lot of the closing line movement is not accurate. The public bets someone, the majority of the public see something wrong. And some of my favorite bets are when I bet the opposite of the closing line movement, the opposite of the public. And what makes us great bettors is we see something that's not surface level. We see something outside of the obvious thing on tape. And when they smash it with the CLV, then we bet the other side. That's one of my favorite bets. The main thing is just because you're getting CLV doesn't mean you're going to win all your bets. So it's not really that essential to keep getting these CLV plays. And second of all, you're just going to lose. You're going to lose your account extremely quickly, and it's not worth it, right? So just do what you naturally feel like. Look at the fight, and if you think this is a good bet, it's going to close a lot shorter, a lot more money is going to come into it, then just bet it. But don't do a cheating method like myself, years ago. Just because I had CLV doesn't mean I won, and it just cost me some of my accounts nice and quick. And lastly, I don't think this has actually been proven. Maybe it works in Australia, maybe it's not even proven. But from my experience, I found that avoiding cashing out constantly prolongs my account. Again, I don't know if this is true. So I usually have around 20 to 30,000 in my accounts. Some people make $1,000 and then they cash out and they do it again, deposit, then make money, then cash out. Like they need to cash out to pay their bills, but it's like they're scared to have their money on the actual book. To me personally, obviously, I always have to build a bankroll. I have big units, 1,000 or 1,000 plus. I can't bet unless I have, a lot of money on the bookie. And it's kind of pointless for me to deposit, withdraw. So I always leave it up to 30,000. But whenever I had a book that I felt like was broken and it wasn't limiting me for like 6 to 8 months, as soon as I withdrew large amounts of cash, I felt the limiting came on right after that. So that's just my theory. I don't really know if it's accurate or not. Maybe someone in the comments can confirm with me. I've been doing this for 6 years now and I feel like there's some truth to it. Whenever I withdrew big lumps of money on a bookie that lasted me a long time without limiting, then I started getting steps of limiting, reviewing the bets, etc. And things started going downhill from there. Just to go quickly over it, number one, most important is prime the new account for a month. Bet like a casual, bet like an amateur, bet different things, bet small, sporadically. Don't let them pick up a pattern for at least a month. Number two is when you do finish the priming month, bet sporadically. Don't be just targeting specific things where you look like an expert. Number three, avoid cheating and using methods where the bookie can pick up like you are cheating. So always getting closing line movement because you're using some sort of app or method that tells you. The last one, which not really prove it, but I just feel it could be right, is don't constantly withdraw. Just keep winning and leave your money in the book to build up and withdraw when you finally do get limited, right? Which should be easy anyway if you're a full-time gambler because you need to build a bankroll. So that's it. As I said at the start, it's really not possible to completely avoid limiting. It's always going to happen if you do your job right, if you keep winning. If you're losing, it's a different story. You won't have to worry about that. There actually is a couple of books that allow you to bet and never get limited, but they're offshore books, but even they start limiting you, on props and stuff. So that's it. Episode 4, how to avoid limit. Like and subscribe, and thank you for listening.